delighted to be joined by Cherie Blair here at the Tenant Tax Summit in London. Cherie leading the legal challenge for the judicial review. And Cherie, absolutely fantastic to have your contribution here today. Tell us a little bit about the judicial review format, because it's really for the man on the street to challenge government, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I was just updating everyone on the fact that we are still awaiting news from the court as to where our case is. It hasn't gone before a judge yet. This is a little disappointing, but it's not unusual. The court is very busy, and we hope to get an announcement soon. But what is judicial review? Judicial review at the administrative court is there to make sure that the government applies the laws properly, in accordance with the law, and fairly, without discriminating against different people. And so in our case, of course, we are saying that this unfair tenant tax law is discriminating against those hard-working individual landlords who have put their hard-earned savings into small property investments in order to help their income, plan for their retirement, and they are now faced with this tax, which will mean that they can't set off their mortgage, whereas the big corporates, the big private equity firms will still be able to enter into this housing market and set off their mortgage rates. Now, we don't only say that's unfair, we say that it discriminates against the landlords, against the European Convention on Human Rights, which gives you a right to be able to hold your property in a way without unfair taxation. And it's also in breach of the European Union laws, which are competition laws. Some of the basic elements of the EU are about this single market and making sure there's a level playing field for everybody in the same different economic areas. So in this case, of course, it is in when you're letting property to tenants. But what we're saying is it's distorting the market by putting a tax which basically favours companies and big company landlords against institutional investors against the small individual investor. And that's distorting the competition because it's driving out those smaller investors and giving a tax advantage to the bigger investors. That's against EU law, and the government should not be doing it.
Indeed, and clearly you wouldn't take on this judicial review if you didn't think that we had a strong chance of winning.
Well, I'm delighted to be able to do this, not only because we wouldn't be arguing a case if we didn't think it was a good argument, but also because of the novel way that we've raised the funds for this case. Once upon a time, and I've done these cases now for 30 years, I'm very young, obviously, you used to get legal aid for these cases, but that's gone. And now we have this interesting crowdfunding model where individuals who are affected by a piece of legislation who couldn't afford to do this on their own can club together through the crowdfunding platform in order to afford the legal costs and expenses. So if you like, united together, we can challenge the big government that is doing things to us which are unfair.
Now, as a landlord yourself, you can obviously empathise with landlords, and I felt when we were talking in the room just now that you had a particular empathy with the small landlord with maybe one or two properties that, as you mentioned, perhaps has taken them on for a pension hedge to secure financial future, leave a legacy for their children, whatever it may be. These landlords often given a bad rap in the press, but we want to show the good side of landlording, the ethical landlord, and you really empathise with those smaller landlords, don't you?
Totally. And listen, I've got a confession to make. I have a secret passion for Homes Under the Hammer.
Uh-oh.
And, time after time, you see them interviewing people on that programme. And they are ordinary, decent people who have a little bit of money and have decided to try and use that wisely to provide for themselves and their families. I would have thought they were just the sort of people that a Conservative government would want to support rather than bashing them.
Indeed, and that's why we were all so surprised when George Osborne came out with this Section 24, because it does go against the kind of Conservative mantra of supporting, entrepreneurism in the UK.
So, we will take this challenge to the courts, and we will go on and we look forward to seeing the government facing the reality of what this means, not just for the landlords, but also for the tenants and the housing market at a time when people desperately want affordable homes.
Yeah.
How can it make sense
Yes.
to increase the cost of providing those affordable
There's a
homes?
much bigger picture. Well, thank you so much, Cherie. And on behalf of the landlord community, I'd like to thank you for your contribution here today. It's great to see you, and thank you so much for all you're doing for the judicial review process. Great to
My
have you.
pleasure.
Thank you.